So I'm going to be taking a look at this facsimile edition of the X-Men #1. This particular comic was created in 1963. Stan Lee wrote it, and Jack Kirby was the artist on this book. It's pretty rare that people are able to afford an issue of the X-Men #1. It's quite expensive, even a low-grade copy of it. And oftentimes these early books, one of the reasons why they are scarce and they command such a high price is that this was disposable entertainment. It was not meant necessarily to be collected at the time, although some people did collect them. There's something so special about reading a comic in its original format like this. When I started reading, Jim Lee was working on X-Men, and you could kind of sense at that time when I started reading in the 90s that these characters had a lot of history. And so when they released this facsimile, I certainly had read the book before, but I was kind of excited to pick it up so that I could flip through it and read it as it was intended to be. Jack Kirby does an excellent job of covers. There's lots of action happening here. You can clearly see almost all the characters. One thing you'll notice about facsimiles is that they'll have an updated price here. And of course now it has it's a barcode on there. They printed the original ads in these things, which I really like. Partial 3/4 splash page here. Now, all of the characters are kind of being introduced right away. The usage of these word balloons or these thought bubbles, they have these extra little bits of lines coming off, and that's indicating that Professor X, who's a telepath, is talking to other people through his thoughts. So I thought that was kind of a good addition. I don't know how many times they have used this prior to this book. If you know of another comic besides X-Men where there was some kind of telepath or some kind of telepathy between two characters that they use this particular type of thought bubble, just leave it in the comments below. So it introduces Cyclops, the Angel, Iceman, and the Beast. So that's the core of the team. And of course, Professor Xavier. Professor Xavier is looking pretty much like he did for the entire run of the X-Men. And of course, just recently, I believe they've killed off his character, which is pretty questionable from a reader standpoint, seeing how he is the core of the X-Men. In the past, due to limitations with color printing, the colorist would get in here and they would do something called flatting. And flatting just meant that you mostly would just flat the colors. So this purple color right here, it would just be a flat purple, and then a blue for the costume, yellow for the costume there, and that's pretty much what it would be like. Now you can see some variations a little bit. There wasn't inside of this spinning ball here, you can see they've added blue against the white, which really helps with that. And also in Iceman, well, although he looks a little bit more like a snowball man, as I said, in Iceman here, you can see that they've used intentionally some blue to kind of give it more two tones here. So it wasn't impossible to introduce more than one color in a section, but you'll notice a lot of these are just flatted out. And nowadays, that would be the first stage of coloring, which would be flatting. Then they would move on to multiple colors and multiple layers, and it's gotten quite sophisticated now. One of the things that I think was appealing about the X-Men is that they had all these powers, but they weren't fully honed. Their powers were sometimes slightly uncontrolled or unpredictable sometimes, and I think that added an extra layer to why the X-Men were so interesting for so many years. By page 7, suddenly they are introducing a new character. And I think that that's quite effective story-wise, which is, you've kind of established the setting, you've established the characters, and now suddenly you're throwing in a new character. And of course, it's a contrasting character, so Stan Lee was quite good at this. And of course, Jack Kirby contributed quite a bit to these storylines as well. But you can see that Jean Grey is now in here, and she's a bit of a contrast. All of the X-Men are over here looking out the window as she's getting out of the cab, and they're commenting about what she looks like and how attractive she is and that sort of thing. And that really contrasts some of the other characters, right? So you have a lot of men here, and then suddenly you're introducing a girl into the mix. Now, as we're moving along here, you'll notice too that some of these older comics from the 60s, they have a lot more text in here. This is way more text than what you see in contemporary comics. And I think that contemporary comics or the modern era of comics, I think we could learn a little bit about what might be beneficial, which is sometimes I think they've stripped away too many words, and there's not enough development sometimes in a short period of time because they're not mastering that. Now, does it have to be this text heavy? Absolutely not. I think that this maybe is a little bit too much, although when you start reading it, you really start to connect with and understand the characters and what they're about a lot faster than some of these modern comics. We quickly flip back and forth. You started off here are all the characters. There's almost immediately going into some action by page 3 here. And that lasts a couple of pages, and then it starts to slow down a little bit, and then now we're back into there's like some good balance. Now Jean Grey is coming in here, and there's even a tiny bit of action here as well, not totally, mostly with the Beast. And you'll notice something, the Beast looks very human. It wasn't until later on that the Beast got his blue signature fur. The writer's showing what the characters are like. Like the Beast is kind of being a little bit too direct with Jean Grey there. And then now suddenly we have the introduction of the villain. Okay, so Magneto is one of the first villains of the X-Men. He's certainly a mutant that has a lot of powers that could challenge the X-Men. So then we go back into more, okay, now we're introducing some tension here. We're introducing a villain. We're seeing what's at stake. There's a little bit of action. There's interaction with the regular world, with the military and what Magneto can do, which was great. Again, I think this is kind of a good, getting close to a good balance of text versus imagery. Really good sequencing here by Jack Kirby. Some interesting dynamic sequential art here. Some good angles. One thing I want to say about Jack Kirby's work is that he was always so good at showing variety within a page. But again, good attention to backgrounds, good character anatomy, lots of dynamic posing. You can see right here some really interesting angles. This is quite an interesting angle for Iceman here. But yeah, just really, really good sequential storytelling. Everything's consistent. The characters are consistent. They're speaking with the same tone as they go along. Some really interesting stuff, like this frame right here. Kirby was always good at giving a sense of energy in the environment. I've always found that I really liked about the X-Men is that they have a lot of scope, and things seemed a little bit more grandiose. When they're doing battles and things like this, you can see like Iceman is preventing these missiles from going. Everything seems quick here and fast. And again, I mean, it's hard to really beat Kirby when it comes to action. And if anyone's really interested in drawing action for comics, I highly suggest going back and looking at some of Kirby's sequences. It's tough to really not get something from them, even though he was working in this time period. Now, this comic is a lot shorter than some people think. You can see here's page 22, so there's only 23 pages total in this comic. And of course, I think one of the things I like about this comic the most is that it's really just, it's an introduction to some characters that really have stuck around for the long term. Characters that people really became invested in. Lots of great character development happened over the years, and it's really just great to see kind of where those origins are and what their appeal might be. It's so great to be able to pick up these facsimiles for a pretty good price and be able to experience this particular comic the way it was sort of meant to be read. And that's one thing that I think people should really kind of think about, like, especially with digital work. I certainly occasionally will read things digitally, but for whatever reason, I keep gravitating back towards the original physical comic. There's just something so wonderful about holding it in your hand, about not looking at a screen, just being absorbed by the story. Like, if you love these characters, if you've been reading these characters for years, like I have, I think it's totally worth having this graded and then encapsulated so that you can hang it on your wall. Like, it is an origin piece that just can't be beat. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, click a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. And remember, own your media.